Amidst the mounting social inequalities and massive environmental concerns of modern societies, radical change within the dominant socioeconomic system, capitalism, becomes less of an idealistic dream and more of an absolute necessity. That is, if the human species, along with the rest of the planet's life, are to continue thriving. It is the imperatives of never-ending growth and individualistic accumulation of wealth that have enabled the power structures causing these ailments. To tackle them on a systemic level, a new paradigm, a new set of ethics and practices, a new discourse needs to be established, through which novel social and technological structures can flourish. The commons are increasingly put forth as such a paradigm. The term originates in the communal management of resources, natural and cultural, within a community. Commons can be the fisheries managed by local communities to avoid overfishing whilst providing enough for everyone to sustain themselves. It can be animal grazing lands where shepherds collectively move their herds around without degrading plant life. It can be the folk songs developed and disseminated within diverse cultures across the history of our species. It can also be software, design files for objects, and any other type of digital information openly distributed online under non-restrictive licenses. The word rose to prominence in the 60s when Garrett Hardin spoke about the tragedy of the commons. He was talking about a free-for-all regime applied to a natural resource which is inadvertently depleted due to selfish overconsumption of individuals. However, that does not actually describe a commons. The commons typically include distinct communities that govern the use of a resource. Individuals in these communities, the commoners, decide upon their own rules of access to the resource. They delegate responsibilities and management and penalize abusers and freeriders. The commons is a social process. A verb rather than a noun, commoning entails all those actions necessary to collectively create and maintain a local resource, or a wider resource like the air and the oceans, or the planet itself. It is obvious that the logic of the commons may be applied to multiple manifestations of human activity. Considering how the vast majority of humans are expected to be living in cities by 2050, the urban commons is a field showing great promise in revolutionizing urban life towards more equitable and environmentally conscious practices. The urban commons puts citizens at the core of the discussion on how to organize the city. Public spaces and infrastructure, the urban land, becomes urban commons when citizens actively use, manage and transform them to produce goods and services for the urban population. By introducing local communities in the network of actors active in city life, which are typically composed of the government, private businesses, and at best case scenarios non-profit organizations, the urban commons may enable collaborative, inclusive, and just deliberation on the purpose and function of urban space. The urban commons can empower citizens to focus their social energy beyond merely being consumers and into contributing to the development of creative solutions for systemic problems. Contrary to the neoliberal trend towards the commodification of the public space, the first step for establishing the city as a commons is to stop the enclosures of collective wealth. Enclosures can be seen in the excess commercialization of public spaces, ghost neighborhoods, the austerity policies which lead increasingly to poor city services, the private control of data collected in smart cities, and overall urban development which is typically accessible only to the wealthy. Stopping such practices implies that novel ways of managing and governing the city would need to be introduced, as well as appropriate technologies which may support them. The smart city and the cluster of technologies associated with it are, by definition, a top-down affair. Massive amounts of data are aggregated and analyzed centrally, at best by government bodies which at the very least respect the privacy of millions of citizens. At worst, this data is outsourced to the highest bidding private corporation to be handled at their discretion. The city as a commons, on the other hand, is bottom-up. By viewing the city as a network of interlinked social groups and communities, different types of innovation, both social and technological, are required to harness their creative capacity and determination to produce solutions for their own problems. That is the opposite of the typical government approach that treats community initiative as a hindrance to homogenized, cookie-cutter policies. For example, projects for urban agriculture and green spaces, housing projects and neighborhood watches, and cultural heritage projects exemplify how commons-oriented organizational structures may thrive, while community makerspaces and fab labs are hubs for community-led technological innovation. At the same time, the core principle of inclusivity at the heart of the city as a commons makes it susceptible to tensions due to competing kinds of commons. Like, for example, prioritizing a community garden over an affordable housing project. However, it is through the enhanced participation in deliberation processes that the voices of disenfranchised people can be heard amongst the powerful.